Hello and welcome to TVI Tips from Amanda. This video is going to concentrate on the dot combinations for the letters N through Z, and we'll talk along the way about a few strategies for learning some of the letters visually, not tactily. So we've covered A through M. Now we're on the letter N. N is dots 1, 3, 4, 5. I don't really have a strategy for N other than just memorizing when you feel it that there's a slashy part, that slant where there's no dots when you feel the letter N. O, sometimes this letter is hard for some of my students. It feels pretty spread out when you're reading the letter O, but also if you think about writing the letter O, if you were to go, and I write O typically the other way, but if you were to think about someone starting that letter O and then stopping, sometimes my students really enjoy when I talk about whoever made braille was kind of crazy and they were kind of sloppy with their writing, and so for sighted children, thinking about just starting that O and not finishing, it's like partial O, 1, 3, and 5, and they would draw it as a 1, 5, and 3, but just know that it's a 1, 3, 5. For sighted people, or me, that really helped me to learn O. P is dots 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like a P if you were to label the dots on the P. Or it looks like, it's hard to write one-handed and hold the phone at the same time, but it looks like a P. Ta-da! 1, 2, 3, 4 is P. Q looks like a backwards Q. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you put the hook the wrong way, you would have like a G actually, but I just think of it as a backwards Q. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's also easy to remember that that's almost a full cell and just order them the right way. Just looks like someone draw a backwards Q. R is dots 1, 2, 3, 5. It kind of looks like an R if you were to draw the R on there, a crazy extra tall point or line on that left side of the R. Also, R can be confused with W, which we'll talk about later on in the alphabet, but R's dot points to the right side. R, right side. 1, 2, 3, and 5 is R. S, if you connect the dots visually, kind of has a curve in it, like an S. 2, 3, 4. Those of you who know me in person or who have watched other videos know that I like to have songs and chants for some of my words and letters and braille things, and S is 2, 3, 4. And for some students who just S is tricky, we'll just chant over S is 2, 3, 4, S is 2, 3, 4, and they get that chant stuck in their head, and then later on if they need to know what S is, you can just say S is 2, 3, 4. T is 2, 3, 4, 5. To me, it kind of looks like a crazy slanted T. If you have someone who's having a hard time memorizing T, it kind of has that feeling of up over up for someone who's just learning that shape of what the letter feels like. 2, 3, 4, 5 is a T. Here's the letter U, dots 1, 3, and 6. Haven't really learned a strategy to know U, but there you go. V is 1, 2, 3, and 6. W, often confused with the letter R. Let's go back and find R. So in R, you have a straight line down and a dot on the right side towards the right. W is the opposite. It's a 2, 4, 5, 6. When I'm introducing braille letters to adults and students, I don't usually say it's the opposite of or it's a backwards whatever. I want them to find those connections themselves. So if someone was confusing R and W, I might tell them about the dot on the R being on the right side and the lonely dot on the left for W pointing towards the west. If you know your compass rose, if you have a student who knows left and right and you know north, south, east, and west, you could use that as a trick. 2, 4, 5, 6 for the W. X is 1, 3, 4, 6. So my students learn it as you have, if you're writing it, you dip down your middle fingers on both your left and right hands. Some of them learn if they have some vision, you can connect your dots on your X to make it into an X. Other students might learn there's a big gap in the middle, but there are two dots at the top and 2 dots at the bottom of the X. Here's the letter Y for my students. A lot of my students have Y's in their first name, and so when we start learning braille, I usually teach them their first name first because it's the most motivating thing to learn. And so we might talk about how Y is 1 and 3 and 4, 5, 6. That's the chant that I use for Y. 1 and 3 and 4, 5, 6. There's a Y. And the letter Z for me was really hard to learn. It's 1, 3, 5, 6. It's a letter we don't use often. So in another video, we'll talk about the actual Braille dot pattern to learning the alphabet. There are, if you can memorize the first 10 letters, then you can learn how to add dots and make the rest of the alphabet. To me, that's trickier than just memorizing groups of the letters, but we'll talk about that in another video. And one of the strategies that I just used for a student last week who was really struggling, even though she knew Z in the past, over the summer she had just regressed and forgotten Z. She knew Y because there's a Y in her name. So we talked about how Z was the same as a Y. You just take away the dot 4. So if you can remember Y, you can remember Z. Just take away the dot 4. I often confuse, or when I first started to learn Braille, I often would confuse Z and the, and because we use the contraction for the more often than we use the letter Z, I just memorized the and then knew that Z was the opposite of the. But again, I don't like to teach people opposites when we're first starting to learn Braille, because what feels like an opposite for me might not be an opposite for you, and you can flip the Braille cell so many different ways that I like students or adults who are learning Braille or parents who are learning Braille to make connections to learn letters and contractions in their own way. But these are just some tips that I've used in the past for the alphabet. In future videos, we'll talk about strong contractions and whole and part word contractions and all the other things, and some different strategies for learning those groups of letters. So if you have any questions on this part of the alphabet, let me know and I'll help you out. And look for another video in coming days of the pattern for A through J, and then adding on more letters to that, or more dots to make the letters the same. But yes, I hope this was helpful. Thanks.